This is gonna be hard to talk about for me, but I'm gonna do it. Welcome Black. Hello, welcome Black. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna be talking about the fact that while out here in Thailand, I got COVID and was put in a hospital pretty much against my will for 10 days. Yeah, and it was really bad. It was a really bad, rough experience. I'm gonna tell you about it, the play-by-play. Of course, I had some positives throughout. January's been a rough month, or was a rough month. It's gone now. We're in February now, and yes, so sit back, relax, and yeah, here we go. All right, so for New Year's, I traveled to Phuket, Thailand. Phuket is known to just be like the place all the tourists go to. I went with a friend. I think I had gotten a COVID test before then, and of course it was negative, or else I wouldn't have gone. But I went to Phuket, I had fun, but there were a lot of people there. There was a lot of people, there was a lot of foreigners. So it wasn't even just Thai people, it was a lot of Europeans, some Americans. We did a lot of activities. We went island hopping. On New Year's, we saw like the fireworks, and there was just a bunch of people. The whole time I wore a mask, okay? The whole time I did wear a mask. Also, I had just gotten the booster. So I had been vaccinated, I got the Pfizer, but a couple days before I left for Phuket, like literally 2 days, I had just gotten the booster out here in Thailand. So I was like, okay, I'm protected, I'm good. I wore a mask the whole time, but it was a cloth mask. And I found out, literally, I remember like on the last day in Phuket, I was like watching a video saying basically how like just one cloth mask basically like doesn't really do much in actually preventing like you getting COVID if you're around someone who does. And I was around so many people. So that's what happened before. Phuket was great. Now I don't know if I regret going, but that's, I guess, where I got COVID. I remember towards the end of the Phuket trip, I started to feel a little sick, but again, I had just gotten the booster. So I genuinely thought I got the booster, was drinking a little, New Year's, it's fine, in Phuket. So I was like, okay, the booster smashed my immune system along with the drinking, like my immune system was shot, which I was like, okay. So I remember feeling a little sick. I remember I was really fatigued and my throat hurt. And my head hurt a little bit, and that was it. Literally, that was it. So I was like, this isn't even a cold. Like, I was like, let me just take a Zyrtec, take an Advil, go to sleep, wake up, fine. So the day I left for Phuket, I was at the airport. I remember I had a BLT, so I took my mask off a little bit to eat the BLT, but by then I had been feeling better than the day before. I felt really well rested after I had slept. So that was Monday. So I'm at the airport coming back from Phuket. Again, I feel a little like but by Monday I felt better already. So I was like, okay, like effects from the booster, feeling better, great. Then Tuesday comes. Tuesday, January 4th, all right? So Tuesday, I'm a teacher here in Thailand, so I came to school. Now my school assumed, which is a valid assumption, that everyone should probably get COVID tested. All the students were online because they were like, everyone's probably out traveling or was out traveling for New Year's. So all the students were gone and it was just us teachers. And they were like, okay, since everyone just probably got back from New Year's plans, we're gonna test everybody. So I'm like, okay, I go to school. By this time again, I already been feeling better than the day before. So I was like, yeah, I have a little cold, but like, it's also not really a cold because I'm not coughing. My nose wasn't runny. Like, so I have a little cold, but I'm like, it's whatever. So I remember I'm at the school, you know, it's a regular Tuesday. My room was a mess because I'm like, I'm coming back. I had whatever on me. I literally just had my laptop and my bag because I was just like, it's just school. I'm gonna Zoom from school and I'm gonna go back home. So I'm at school, they test me. I'm sitting in the school, like little thing. And then one of the coordinators comes to me and who's works with us, and she's just like, And of course the English isn't great, but she's like, Aziza, your test came back positive. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, but like, it's okay. It's just 50%. Just wait, just stay right here. Just wait right here. Like, it's just 50%. We're going to test you again. And because sometimes it's a false positive. And I'm like, okay. She's just like, don't worry, don't worry. Thai culture is very like, don't worry. It's fine. Everything will work out. Everything will be okay. Child, long story short, I got tested again. I had COVID. So then they literally from the school did not let me go to my apartment or anything. They took me from the school in an ambulance by myself. Obviously, it was in the ambulance by myself, but they followed in the car behind me. For some reason, the lady recorded me getting into the ambulance, probably to confirm that I was, actually getting in the ambulance. I climb into the ambulance. They drive me to some field. I guess it's near the hospital. They test me again. It's COVID. And then they're like, basically tell me that I'm going to have to quarantine. And I'm like, okay. At this point, I'm thinking, I'm going to quarantine in my apartment. Like, I feel fine. It's not that deep. It's COVID. Like, it's not that deep. I can be in my apartment for 2 weeks. It's cool. Like, I was nervous and scared, but I was just like, okay, it's whatever. I know Omicron is running wild, all that stuff. And then the doctor, they don't speak English very well, but my school coordinators, like, they're translating. They're asking me everything I did, every person I saw, every activity I did in Phuket. What was the name of the activity? What'd you do after that? What'd you do after that? I was really just sitting there like, oh my gosh, is this real? Like, I think I was in shock. I was genuinely in shock. I was just like, okay. So I'm like telling them all this information. And then I feel like something was just like, make sure you can quarantine in your apartment. Because I remember I called my family and I was like, okay, I have COVID, this is what's going on. And they were like, oh my gosh. And I was like, I'm praying I can quarantine in my apartment. And my mom was like, well, yeah, of course. Like, where else are you gonna quarantine? And I was like, I don't know, they might make me do it in the hospital. Child, I asked my co-teacher, whatever person, I was like, can I quarantine in my apartment? And she was like, oh no. She was like, no. Like, you have COVID. You have to stay in the hospital. And literally the second she said that, I just started crying. Like, I literally just started crying. Like, my eyes just got watery. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. And she was just like, it's okay. And in my head, I'm like, what? I was like, bro, no. Like, you're telling me I have to sit in a hospital for possibly 2 weeks where I don't know anybody. Like, I don't speak the language. I don't have privacy. Like, what? So eventually they bring my coworkers in. They're outside at the field. They have to get tested. I'm like an emotional wreck at this point because I'm literally standing outside. I just remember looking at the leaves like, this is the last time I'm gonna see these leaves. This is the last time I'm gonna be outside for like who knows how long. It was so rough. Like, it was such an emotional, just like, what? So long story short, they put me back in the ambulance. They drive me to the hospital. I go to the hospital. I end up sitting in what I think is my quarantine room, which apparently I found that it was more of a holding cell. They take my blood because I guess they want to do the PCR test just to be like 100% positive. Find out later, again, the language barrier made this 10 times harder because there were so many things that like nurses would literally come in and be like, I feel like I would understand that they're telling me like, you have to do this, but I couldn't really ask questions because I'm like, you don't speak the language. They're trying to explain it to me. I'm trying to use Google Translate. I'm also like scared and nervous. It was so much. So I'm sitting in this holding room. There's a camera in the room. And I'm like, no, I don't like the fact that there's a camera in the room. They make me take off my clothes and change and put on like some hospital thing that doesn't really fit. So I remember I unplugged the camera that was in that room because I was like, nope, y'all not about to have me in here. And then a nurse literally came in and plugged the camera back in. And I just remember, I was just like, so at this point, I'm just like, it's just starting to kind of set in. Like, you have COVID, you were literally taken from your school, you cannot leave here, like you have COVID, like, and the whole time I'm feeling good. Like, I'm feeling fine. I guess I was asymptomatic. So found out that they were doing a PCR test. 5 hours later, they were going to see if I really had COVID or not, just to make sure or whatever. But like 5 hours, a nurse comes in and she was basically like, you have COVID. Here is this medication. But of course, she just hands me all these pills. And I guess it's some pills that they have out here in Thailand. They're still being tested, but they're like pretty sure to kill COVID. I forgot the name. I'll put the name here on the screen. It starts with an F. But she just hands me literally 12 pills. Like, it's like I have a handful of pills and she's just like, basically eat them or never. And I was like, huh? I'm like, okay, what? I have to take, I'm like, it's giving like overdose. I was just like, why am I taking 12 pills of something? And again, the language barrier, not really asking questions. But then she was just standing there like, and I'm like, I have to deal with their rules, because I'm just like, I could be like, no, I refuse, and they might call the police. And I'm like, so I just was like, okay, took all these pills. And then I find out, I think eventually later, they took me to another room. So I thought that was gonna be my quarantine room. It wasn't. I was like messaging the nurse. There was a nurse they gave me, and I was able to message her in English, and I guess she would translate it and then message me back in English, who told me that actually wouldn't be my room, that I would be put in another room. So like the whole holding cell experience was like 5 hours. And then they eventually took me into a room. By this time it was at night. There was a gecko in the room. The room was not cute. The room was giving abandoned asylum. Like, the room was, and then the first room they took me into, I refused to stay in there because there was a toilet that flushed every like second. Like, it was just on its own, flush, and it would keep flushing and it would keep flushing. And I literally called the nurse and I was like, no, I refuse to be in this room. This is creepy. It was creepy. They didn't understand what I was saying. So they put me in another room, and I was in that room for the next 10 days. And all in all, that's essentially how it happened. That's essentially what happened. And I'm gonna get into my feelings and reflections about this, but one of the worst things was that I knew I'd have to be there 10 days. I went in on the 4th. They told me you can leave on the 14th, which was my birthday. So I was just like, and so many things changed. I was like, what if it gets worse? What if I have to stay here longer? So I was like, okay, 10 days. I just feel like mentally I just had to be like, okay. But the worst thing that happened was that for the first 4 or 5 days, I was in the room by myself, which makes sense because I'm quarantining because I have COVID. Then at some point, the hospital got full because more people started getting COVID. They put another person in the room with me, obviously, who also had COVID. It was a small room. There was no curtain. There was a camera in the room, and it was terrible. So I'm gonna get into that a little bit. But yeah, that was essentially what happened, how it happened, and how my January kind of went. So now I'm gonna kind of talk about just overall, like, just reflections and why it was just so bad. Again, that's essentially what I had to do. So the first reason, one of the biggest reasons it was just so bad was because I feel like I was essentially trapped. Like, I actually was trapped. I could not go anywhere. There was nowhere in the hospital I could leave and walk around like a field. I literally had to stay in that room. Decisions were being made for me, whether I liked it or not. Every day at 7 a.m., I would be awoken by a nurse, and every day, 5 times a day, they took my blood pressure, they monitored my heart rate, they took my temperature, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner would come. The food was not good. The food was hospital food that was not good. And I could not order food from places because it couldn't be delivered to that ward of the hospital. The only food I can get delivered was 7-Eleven. So it was literally between hospital food and whatever's at 7-Eleven, which is all packaged stuff. Someone decided when I ate, when I should get up, People were watching me. There was also that was another aspect of terror, because I'm like, okay, I'm a black woman here in Thailand. Like, people already stare at me all day, all the time. I'm like, I don't know who's watching this camera. I don't know if there's a pervert on the other line. I can't even really, do whatever, because I'm just like, somebody's watching me. And I was like, I literally, the first day I was like, please take this camera down. I don't like the fact that this camera's here. And they're like, well, it's for your safety. Like, if you have a heart attack in the middle of the night, that way we can come in. It was a mess. So I was being surveilled. There might be footage of like some black girl in Thailand somewhere on the dark web. Someone could have been recording me. Like, I have no idea. So that was why that was bad. Because I'm just like, dang, who knows what y'all are doing with this footage. And another reason it was so bad was because no matter how much I cried, no matter how much I begged, no matter how much I was like, no, put my foot down, it essentially did not matter. I had no voice. I literally had no voice and no power. Because if I'm like, turn the camera off, I'm not comfortable with that, they're like, no. If I'm like, I don't want somebody in this room who has COVID, who could have a whole nother strain, who could reinfect me or something, I don't know. I don't want this, I'm not comfortable with this. They were like, oh well. Just so many things where I was essentially told like, doesn't matter, no, sorry. That was really bad. That was just really terrible, because I'm just like so used to being able to be a free person, and I really was not. And the thing is, I know in life people always talk about how you have to relinquish control. You don't have control over your life, and that is so real. That is so real. But this is different, because I was just like, it's like, it's just a situation where you just have no control over. And I'm like, a lot of situations in life, especially as I've been here and traveled, you really don't have control over. But this was like to the extreme. Like, this was like, you don't have control, you don't have a voice. You're saying, hey, I don't like this. They're saying, oh well. They're saying no. They're saying X, Y, and Z. So that was really difficult. When they told me they would bring the other person in, I was like, no. I was trying to fight with the nurse. The nurse called me. The nurse hung up on me. I was calling my coordinators crying. I was calling the program. I was like, this is what they're trying to do. Everyone was like, what? But then eventually there was really nothing I could do. They told me I could go to another hospital where I would have to take an ambulance there, which is money, and the nearest other big hospitals in Bangkok, which was going to be some time away. But as my coordinators were trying to call and make the plans for this, everywhere kept saying, well, she's going to have to be in a room with other people because COVID's getting so bad. So there was absolutely no situation where I'd be able to be in a room totally by myself. And here's what really got me. Okay, so here's the thing. When I had COVID, I was asymptomatic. So I had no symptoms. Like, again, when I told you I was a little sick that first day in Phuket, every day after that I felt fine. The Tuesday that I was taken to the hospital, I had a runny nose, but I literally think that was because I was crying so much. And literally the rest of the days, especially once I took that medicine, I felt fine. I was fine. I never lost my sense of taste, never lost my sense of smell. I was not coughing. I felt fine, tip top. So that's what also made it feel like prison even more, even though it's not prison, and I'm not claiming that I was in prison, so I'll address that. But that's what made it worse, because I'm like, I'm literally sitting here fine. Yes, I have COVID, but I'm like, I could be in my apartment. And I kept trying to be like, please, can I just go to my apartment? That I pay rent at? I'm like, that I'm in right now. I'm like, can I go to my apartment? My apartment manager told me no. Yes. My apartment manager was like, she can't come back here until the 10 days are over. To the room I pay for. Okay? So that was terror. And again, I tried to do all of this when the other person was being put in the room, because I was really like, how is this going to work? Like, what if they have a variant? I know antibodies are a thing, but I'm like, do antibodies protect you from other variants? So that was a really hard situation, because I just had to be in the room with that COVID patient, which I did not like and I did not agree with. and I was not okay with, but I was like, well, there's literally nothing I can do. Something else that was frustrating was just the language barrier. Yeah, like it's like makes everything a little bit more difficult because I want to say something, I can say it in Google Translate. Google Translate isn't always great. Then they respond to me, and I feel like they're just having a lot of acting, and I'm like, child. So, and it wasn't always available for me to have like somebody to translate it. One day, I was like, can I get someone to translate it? They literally brought in another COVID patient who knew English, who basically explained, she was the one that explained to me that they're not going to take the cameras down. But yeah, the language barrier just made it even more frustrating and even more just like feeling like a fish out of water, because I was really like, I'm in this foreign hospital, I don't speak the language, I don't know what they're saying for the birds. And I will say, surprisingly, maybe I'm used to being alone. The aspect of not being able to really be around people wasn't terrible. Maybe also because I knew that thankfully I would be leaving. But I will say this, and I'm gonna say this very carefully. Nowhere in my life will I ever claim to know what prison is like. Nowhere in my life, hopefully, will I ever experience prison. And yeah, this was not prison, okay? I was fed, well, I guess you're fed in prison, but like, I was able to talk to my friends, I was able to watch TV, I knew it was gonna be over soon. So while I know this was not prison at all, I will say after this experience, I can definitely get to a point where I can begin to empathize with someone who was imprisoned, just because of the fact that you really don't have any say. Like it's really like you are just nothing. Like you are really just like cattle. Like you are really just like an animal that's kind of put away, and again, of course it's different because I had COVID, so it's kind of like, okay, well, you're sick, so like you can't really be around people, we don't want this to get infected. Thailand takes COVID seriously, obviously, and obviously if you're in prison, it's definitely different. So again, I'm not relating the experiences, but I'm just saying I feel like I can really begin to empathize with someone who like has trauma associated with being imprisoned. I really can begin to see what that not is like, but like I can see that, because I'm like, wow, yeah, this was just a teaspoon of that, and this was terrible. And again, I know I have voice in general, but I'm just saying in that specific experience, I essentially had no voice and no power. So I feel like that's an experience that my ancestors know, unfortunately, all too well. People who are in prison, have been in prison, are currently in prison, know all too well. And like, again, this was like just scratching the surface to all of that. I'm not gonna act like I know what that's like, but I will say, just as a Black American, it was really like, it was kind of traumatic. it was actually kind of traumatic, if I'm being really real. And lastly, another unfortunate feeling I had after this too, or during this, I did feel an aspect of guilt, even though I know my situation was the worst out of everyone, but I feel guilty a little bit because everyone who was in the office when I came in that Tuesday had to quarantine. Now, they were able to quarantine in their apartment, so it was different, but I still felt like, dang, like all these people have to quarantine in their home because of me. Like, because I did this, I brought this to them. So that was hard as well. Yeah, and I mean, everyone, I like sent messages to everyone. I was like, I'm sorry this happened, and everyone was very understanding and like, this isn't your fault. Like, obviously, all this stuff, but there was an aspect of me that was just like feeling a little bit guilty about that. But again, there was also horror because I knew that my experience was way worse than theirs. Even though theirs was probably bad, but I'm like, yeah. So that was also a mixed feeling. And in general, as somebody who I feel like is very expressive, somebody who's very free, I hate situations where I can't say no. And I feel like a lot of people for all the women don't like situations where you can, people in general, don't want to be in a situation where you can't say no. And I really feel like this was a situation where I was like, can I please leave? Can I please go to my apartment? I feel fine. Like I will stay locked up. You can put a camera outside my apartment. You can put an ankle monitor on me, like please. And they were like, no. And I will say, me personally, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, I am somebody who definitely takes responsibility. And I do think from this experience, even though, I'm still kind of working through it, of course, but I do think there was a point where I was like, this is the consequence of you living here. This is the consequence of you teaching here in Thailand. It's been amazing since being here. That was a terrible experience, and I'm not gonna let it mess up my other experiences, but I was kind of like, I just heard people in my head being like, are you sure you want to go to Thailand? Like, you do have to like follow their rules and their laws and like all these things. And I just had to really be like, yeah, like if you were in America, you wouldn't have to do this. And I talked to some of my friends in America, and they were saying, Omicron it's like the opposite over there, where Thailand, I feel like they're taking it really seriously. Out there, they weren't. So they were like, at least they're taking it seriously, but it was too serious. And some things really did not make sense. Them bringing somebody else in the room really did not make sense. But yeah, that was also another thing I was kind of wrestling with. Again, I don't regret my decision at all to come here. And again, I've had fun even since being let out. But that was something where I was like, yeah, like that's the thing. When you travel places, you are at the whim of their government. So, or whatever laws that they put, even if it doesn't make sense, even if you're not used to it. Because my thing is, I was like, in America, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, but I feel like being American, in America, you can be on the brink of death. You can be on the brink of death. If you're at the hospital, you could be tied up to all these things. If you are at the hospital and you say, I don't want to pay for this, or I don't want to be here, I want to go home, the doctors might be like, you're going to die if I take this tube out of you. But if that's what you want, usually you can go home. Like, if you're like, because my thing was, I was also like, so I have to pay for this hospital bill. I have insurance, but I was like, what if I tell them I can't pay for this, or I just don't want to be here? They were like, no, oh well. So that's just one of the differences, I think, with just being in Thailand and being in America, a free country, where you can, even if it's against the doctor's orders, you can leave. You can do whatever. Whereas out here, that's not the case. So now I am currently out, obviously, of the hospital. I was thankfully released on my birthday, January 14th. I was released on my 24th birthday. It will be one I never forget. I'm just grateful that I was released on my birthday. I did have to continue quarantining for 4 more days, but I was able to quarantine in my apartment, which was great. I'm COVID free. I've taken tests since then. They've been negative. And what's great is I have the antibodies now. I'm glad I have the antibodies, but I still do have some anxiety about getting COVID while here in Thailand. I also am thankful that I did not have it that bad, because I know some people have had bad symptoms. Thankfully, I didn't have it that bad. So yeah. So I'm grateful for that. And in general, I think well, probably when you see this, or when it comes out, I think it'll be around February 4th, which will be 1 month since I was admitted into the hospital. I think in general, my mental health definitely took a hit, okay? And that's why I was slow with the content in January, because it was just a rough month. I have a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings. There's an aspect of me that feels like when I was away in the hospital, life kind of kept going. And there's just things in like my personal life where I'm like, yeah, things just kind of kept going without me. And I know that's also something that some people will talk about when they're released from prison, like how life really just like goes on. You have to kind of fall back into it. And again, it was just 10 days, but I'm just like saying, and I think in general, I'm still a little angry about the situation. And I'm somebody who's very even keeled. I really don't get angry like that, but I think I just still have some anger just in the fact that I even had to do that, especially since I felt fine. I think I'm a little angry at my school for kind of just putting me in a situation like that. I think I'm still a little angry at my apartment for not letting me come back to the place I pay rent for, and just stay in my room, even though I get it for their safety, but still. So definitely working on letting that go, because it's not good to hold on to anger. But yeah, I feel like I'm not like smashing the wall or whatever, but I think internally I'm just like annoyed, really intensely annoyed and angry that I had to put up with that, and that now has to be like something that I have dealt with. But I want to end the video with positivity. Okay, I think I'm grateful, like I said, that I have the antibodies, so I'm good for like 90 days or whatever. And I want to say that the only thing that made the experience digestible was the fact that I was able to talk to my friends and family as often as I wanted to, as often as they were available. The people out here who I've made friends with were really instrumental in making me feel amazing. My two friends who are American, who are with me, they like called me every day. We like watched a show to like distract ourselves, because they also had to quarantine, but they were able to do it from their apartment. A lot of the school staff who I work with in my office were extraordinarily helpful for me, and like helping me buy things that I needed and drop things off at the hospital, pick things up from my apartment because I needed clothes, toiletries, so you know, things like that, and bringing it to the hospital for me. My family and friends, shout out to you. So I will say, and that's why I definitely think it's not anywhere near like being incarcerated or whatever. But those were things that definitely made the experience like, okay, I can open my eyes today, I can get out of bed today. I was still teaching because I figured I would need something to keep my mind on, so it was cool to do that. My program that I came here to Thailand with, they really supported me. I figured they would support me, but they actually supported me really emotionally, which was great too. There's a representative, he would call me like every other day. So I did have, you know, angels around me. I'm thankful to God that God got me through that situation and that it's over now. But yeah, that is what happened to me between January 4th and January 14th. So yes, comment down below your reactions. You know, it turns out I did have Omicron, so that was the variant that I had. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've had COVID, you've been in a hospital in a foreign country, something. It is not fun. I do not recommend it. I do not recommend it at all. But yes, y'all, I wanted to come on here and be absolutely honest, and just share my experience as honestly, it's cathartic for me to be able to be like, okay, this is what happened. Let you all hear it. And yes, COVID is no joke. I'm really sick of it. I think honestly, COVID in general, like these years that COVID is taking is kind of like traumatic, and I feel like we're not gonna process it till like years later. But stay safe, y'all. Like, get the KN95. That's the biggest takeaway, because I wore my mask, but it was the cloth mask that apparently doesn't really do anything. So double mask. When the girl was in the room with me, I wore 2 to 3 masks at all times. And I sat outside a lot. So I'll just say, wear your mask, get vaccinated. Because I had also gotten the booster, maybe that was also why my symptoms were basically gone, like non-existent. But yeah, y'all, stay safe. It is no joke out here. If you're in a foreign country, and you just stay safe. If you are in a foreign country, stay safe. If you're in America, please stay safe. And yes, love y'all. See y'all soon with another video. Be careful, stay prayed up, and I will see you all soon.